There are certain things you learn to ignore when you live alone. The sound of pipes settling inside the walls. The occasional footsteps from the apartment above you. A car door closing somewhere outside at 2 in the morning. The strange little noises that come with living in a building that was built long before you ever moved into it. You learn to ignore them because if you stopped to investigate every unusual sound, you would never get any sleep. I used to think that was all it took to become comfortable living alone. You simply stopped asking questions. Then, one winter, my doorbell camera recorded a house that wasn't there. My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm 34 years old, and at the time this happened, I was living in a small apartment complex on the outskirts of Portland. Nothing about the place was particularly unusual. It was one of those developments built sometime in the late 70s, with 3-story buildings arranged around a parking lot and a narrow strip of trees behind them. My apartment was on the 3rd floor. From my balcony, I could see the parking lot, the road beyond it, and, depending on the weather, the dark outline of the hills several miles away. It wasn't beautiful, but it was quiet. And after spending most of my 20s living in noisy neighborhoods, quiet was exactly what I wanted. I worked from home as a technical writer, which meant that most of my days were spent in front of 2 monitors, with a cup of coffee slowly going cold beside me. I didn't have a particularly exciting social life. I had a few friends, but most of them lived across town. My evenings usually consisted of cooking something simple, watching whatever documentary I happened to be interested in, and going to bed earlier than I wanted to admit. The building itself was quiet too. There were only 2 apartments on my floor. Mine was 3B. Across the hallway was 3A, occupied by an elderly woman named Mrs. Bell. I'd spoken to her maybe half a dozen times. She was polite but distant, the sort of person who would hold the elevator door for you but wouldn't ask how your day was. The first strange thing happened on a Tuesday. It was around 2:13 in the morning. I was asleep when my phone vibrated on the nightstand. I almost ignored it. Then it vibrated again, and again. I finally reached over and looked at the screen. It was a notification from my doorbell camera. Someone had triggered the motion sensor. I remember being annoyed more than frightened. There was a lot of wind that night, and the camera sometimes reacted to branches moving near the entrance. I opened the notification. The video showed my front door. The hallway was empty, nothing moved. I watched it twice. Then I noticed something. At the very end of the recording, just before the camera stopped, there was a light behind me. Not inside my apartment. Outside. The hallway behind the camera shouldn't have been visible. But for perhaps half a second, the image seemed to brighten. I assumed it was a reflection. I closed the app and went back to sleep. The next morning, I forgot about it. At least I thought I had. 3 nights later, it happened again, 2:13 a.m. Same notification, same camera, same hallway. But this time, there was something different. 3A house. For less than 2 seconds, the video showed a large white house standing directly at the end of the hallway. It had a dark wooden door, 4 windows, a narrow porch, and a small porch light glowing above the entrance. Then the image returned to my normal apartment hallway. 3 meters of beige carpet, a fire extinguisher, a frame picture of the building's floor plan. Nothing else. I watched the recording perhaps 20 times. I even downloaded it to my computer. The house was there. It wasn't a glitch in the sense of a frozen frame. The camera had actually recorded an image that shouldn't have existed. I checked the camera settings. I restarted it. I updated the firmware. Then I convinced myself that it was some kind of corrupted video frame. Technology does strange things. That was the explanation I preferred. The following morning, I mentioned it to Mrs. Bell. She was standing outside her apartment carrying a bag of groceries. I showed her the recording. She watched it once. Then she handed my phone back. "Don't open the door tonight," she said. I laughed because I thought she was joking. She wasn't. I asked her what she meant. She looked toward the end of the hallway. For the first time since I'd met her, I saw something resembling fear on her face. Then she said something I'll never forget. "That house doesn't belong here." I asked her what house she was talking about. She didn't answer. Instead, she went inside her apartment and closed the door. That evening, I searched the building's history online. I expected to find nothing. Instead, I discovered something interesting. The apartment complex had been built in 1978. Before that, the land had apparently been occupied by a private residence, a farmhouse, according to one old planning document. The original structure had been demolished in 1976. I found a photograph of it in an archived newspaper. It was an old white house, large porch, dark front door, 4 windows on the upper floor. I stared at the photograph for a long time. It looked exactly like the house in my camera recording. There was one important difference. The house in the newspaper photograph had been standing on the ground. The house in my recording had been standing at the end of my 3rd-floor hallway. I didn't sleep much that night. At 2:13 a.m., nothing happened. At 2:14, I laughed at myself. Then my phone vibrated. Another motion alert. This time I didn't open it immediately. I sat on my bed and stared at the notification. Eventually, I opened the recording. The hallway was there. Empty. Then the light flickered and the house appeared. But it was closer. The porch was gone. The front door filled most of the frame, and beneath the door there was a thin line of warm yellow light. Someone was standing inside. I couldn't see who. Only the shadow. I watched until the video ended. Then I noticed something else. There was a second motion event, recorded 3 seconds later. I opened it. The camera showed my apartment door, and someone was standing directly in front of it. A woman. She was facing away from the camera. She had long dark hair. She wore what looked like an old-fashioned gray coat. She didn't move. I looked at the timestamp. 2:13:47. I checked the hallway through the peephole. Nothing. I opened my apartment door. Still nothing. But there was something on the carpet. A small brass key. I didn't touch it. I called the building manager. He arrived about 20 minutes later. I showed him the video. He watched it twice. Then he asked me a strange question. "Where did you get that key?" I told him it had been outside my door. He stared at it. Then he picked it up using a tissue. "That's not ours." I asked him what he meant. He said the building had standardized locks. Every apartment used the same style of key. This one was much older. He took it away. I assumed that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The next morning, Mrs. Bell knocked on my door. She stood there for several seconds without saying anything. Then she asked me whether I'd found a key. I didn't tell her about the one the manager had taken. Instead, I asked why. She looked disappointed. "Because I found one too." She disappeared into her apartment. When she returned, she was holding a small brass key. It looked exactly like the one I'd found. She told me she'd lived in the building since 1982. For the first few years, nothing unusual happened. Then, sometime in the late 80s, residents began reporting strange noises, knocking, footsteps, doors opening by themselves. But the reports were always at the same time, 2:13 in the morning. Eventually, the building manager started keeping records. According to Mrs. Bell, there were 12 reports over a period of 3 years. Then suddenly, they stopped. Until I moved in. I asked her why they stopped. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she asked me something. "Do you know what happened to the last tenant in 3B? I told her I didn't. She said his name was Thomas Reed. He had lived in my apartment for almost 15 years. One morning, he didn't show up for work. His employer called the building manager. The manager went upstairs. Thomas was gone. His wallet was still on the kitchen counter. His phone was charging beside the bed. His shoes were by the door. His car was parked outside. There was no sign that he had packed anything. He simply wasn't there. The police investigated. They found no evidence of a struggle. No missing person explanation. Nothing. He had vanished. I asked when it happened. Mrs. Bell looked at me. 3 weeks before you moved in. I didn't sleep that night. At 2:12, I was sitting in my living room with every light on. At 2:13, my doorbell camera activated. I watched the live feed. The hallway was empty. Then the image distorted. Not much. Just enough to make the walls appear to bend. And then the house appeared. This time, the front door was open. Beyond it was a hallway. Not my hallway. A wooden hallway with dark wallpaper and old frame photographs. At the far end stood the woman. She was still facing away from the camera. Then she slowly turned around. The video ended. I didn't see her face because at the exact moment she turned, the camera went black. I stayed awake until sunrise. At 8 in the morning, I called in sick to work. Then I started looking through old property records. It took several hours. Eventually, I found the original house plans. The farmhouse had belonged to a man named Elias Vane. He lived there with his wife and daughter. The daughter was named Clara. According to a newspaper article from 1975, Clara disappeared when she was 17. There was no evidence of kidnapping, no body, no witnesses. The case remained unsolved. A year later, Elias died. His wife moved away. The house was eventually sold and demolished. But one detail caught my attention. The original floor plan showed a narrow staircase leading from the upper hallway to a basement. My apartment building didn't have a basement, at least not one that residents knew about. I went downstairs and found the building manager. I asked him about it. He looked uncomfortable. Then he told me there was an old service room beneath the building. It had been sealed decades ago. He didn't know why. I asked to see it. He refused, so I waited until he left. Then I found the door myself. It was behind a row of storage lockers. The lock was old, and the key Mrs. Bell had given me fit perfectly. Inside was a narrow concrete staircase. It descended farther than it should have. The air smelled damp. At the bottom was a wooden door, and on the door was a number. 3B, my apartment number. I stood there for a long time. Then I heard something from the other side. 3 quiet knocks. I should have walked away. Instead, I opened the door. There was another hallway. The same hallway from the camera. Old wallpaper, wooden floorboards, framed photographs. And at the end was the White House's front door. Except now it was open. I could see a room beyond it. There was a table, 2 chairs, a lamp, and a woman sitting with her back toward me. I didn't move. Neither did she. Then she spoke. "You're late." Her voice sounded like an old recording, flat, distant, almost peaceful. I asked who she was. She turned her head slightly. "Thomas came through here." I felt every muscle in my body tense. I asked where he was. She pointed toward another door. I looked. There was a photograph hanging beside it, a photograph of Thomas Reed. He was standing in the apartment hallway, but the photograph looked old, much older than him. I stepped closer. Then I noticed the date written beneath it, 1976. I turned around. The woman was gone. The room was empty. The lamp was still burning. I ran. I didn't stop until I reached my apartment. I called the police. They came. We searched the building. The sealed room was there. The staircase was there. but the hallway was gone. The wooden door opened into a concrete storage area. Nothing else. The officers thought I'd been sleep deprived. Maybe I had. Maybe I imagined everything. That would have been easier. Except the following morning, Mrs. Bell disappeared. Her apartment door was unlocked. Her purse was on the kitchen table. Her groceries were still in the refrigerator. Her television was playing quietly, but she was gone. The police searched for her. They found nothing. A week later, I moved out. I never told anyone the entire story. I didn't even tell the police about the woman. I simply packed my things and left. For months afterward, nothing happened. I moved into a new apartment across town. I bought a different phone. I deleted the doorbell camera account. I stopped thinking about the house. At least I tried to. Then, almost a year later, I received an email. There was no sender name, no subject, just one attachment. A photograph. I opened it. It showed the hallway outside my new apartment. At the end of the hallway stood the White House. The same house, the same dark door, the same 4 windows. And standing beneath the porch light was the woman. This time, she was facing the camera. I couldn't see her face clearly, but I recognized her coat, and I recognized something else. She was holding a small brass key. Beneath the photograph was a single sentence. Some houses don't disappear. They move. I never replied. I deleted the email, then I checked my door. It was locked. The chain was across. Everything was normal. For a while. Then I heard 3 quiet knocks, not from the front door, from inside my bedroom closet. I didn't open it. I never did. I moved again 2 weeks later. I've changed apartments 4 times since then. I don't use smart cameras anymore. I don't answer unknown numbers, and I never live on the 3rd floor. But there's one thing I still can't explain. Every few months, usually around winter, I receive another photograph, always from a different apartment. Sometimes a hotel room, once a hospital corridor, always the same White House, always the same dark door, and always, somewhere in the photograph, that brass key. The most recent photograph arrived 3 nights ago. It showed a small house in the middle of a quiet suburban street. The house looked ordinary, almost comforting. There was snow on the roof, a warm light in one window, and beside the front door was a small brass plaque. It had a name engraved into it. My name. Daniel Mercer. I stared at the photograph for several minutes. Then I noticed the date in the corner. It wasn't a date from the past. It was tomorrow. And beneath the photograph was another sentence. This time, there were only 4 words. Leave the light on. I haven't slept since. But tonight, for the first time, I'm beginning to wonder whether that was the wrong thing to do. Because about an hour ago, the hallway light outside my apartment went out. And just now, someone knocked 3 times from inside my bedroom closet. I think I'll leave the light on